Apparently, rebuilding a lost wall is not all that common for my contractors. Open concept has been a growing trend for what seems like decades, and tearing them down has been mostly a one-way street. But why did we start designing that way? Comparing modern floor plans to 19th century homes with their parlors, sitting rooms, halls, and basement kitchens seems like a massive change in just a century. There had to be a reason, right? And if so, have our lives changed so much since then that we're due for a trend of separate rooms again? Maybe if we understand how open floor plans were introduced, we can understand where they are headed next. Or at least I can understand why I dislike them so much. I admit I'm personally not a big fan of open floor plans. This is the first house I've owned that is clearly broken up rather than the kitchen and living merging into one space, and that was on my goal list. However, there is one tiny bit of this trend that managed to infiltrate my house. As you can see, I have half a wall, kind of. It used to be a whole wall with an arched doorway. In fact, right now you can see the vent system that was chopped off to achieve an indoor planter. Unsurprisingly, I am restoring said vent, which connects to the main bedroom, and bringing back the arch. But my curiosity has gotten the best of me, and I want to understand why and possibly when this happened. What was so tempting style-wise? I quickly discovered this may be a more difficult task than I imagined. The term open concept is very recent, and even open floor plan only got me a few articles. I even tried looking for things related to half walls and a variety of similar terms, construction on removing walls, and more. Searching for open kitchen did get me a little further in a few decades, but it was still scattered. I realized I was going to have to just dig through floor plans. So, after a few thousand examples from home catalogs, many of which you can find on HathiTrust, and dozens of opinionated articles, I think I'm beginning to see some patterns. It turns out how we needed a house, especially a small house, to operate for us has changed in ways even I didn't expect. From kitchens to bedrooms, the sizes, placement, and transitions have gone through so many variations. I knew some of this, deciding to leave my oversized king bed behind and get a trimmer queen for the main bedroom here. That also meant a new mattress, which I thankfully already have a favorite for. The sponsor for today's video is Birch. Between construction, deconstruction, and stress from renovating a home, I desperately need a good night's sleep every night. That's why I'm so happy to introduce Birch. Birch Living makes mattresses and sleep products that are crafted with responsibly sourced materials such as organic cotton, organic wool, and 100% natural latex. They're also free from polyurethane foams, which can cause harmful off-gassing, and are constructed without fiberglass, which can be detrimental to your health, not to mention just plain itchy. Unlike synthetic mattresses, the wool makes them hypoallergenic and mildew resistant, which I am definitely thankful for with my very long list of allergies. I literally just unboxed this mattress a few minutes ago after it arrived, and I cannot express to you how excited I am to finally sleep here tonight. This is the Birch Luxe Natural Mattress, which is a premium upgrade to their original, well-loved Birch Natural Mattress. I have actually been sleeping on this style for about 3 years now, and it has made such a difference. Thankfully, I had one for my guest room too, since that's where I've been sleeping while moving in. I can honestly say that with my Birch mattress, I sleep through the night and wake up without sore muscles and joint pain. And while I'm renovating an old house, that's an absolute feat. And you don't have to worry about trying it out. With your Birch mattress, you can get a 100-night sleep trial. That means you'll get more than 3 months to make sure that you love it. The best part about all of this is that Birch delivers your mattress right to your door for free within the US. They also offer in-home setup and removal to make your buying experience as convenient as possible. Each Birch mattress comes with 2 of their EcoRest pillows made from recycled materials. They're breathable and better for the environment. I love my Birch Living mattress, and I think you would too. check out birchliving.com/Nicole Rudolph and use my exclusive code BirchPartner27 to get 27% off plus 2 free EcoRest pillows with your mattress purchase during their 4th of July sale. Thanks again to Birch. Before we can understand why the open floor plan happened, we have to understand, well, why it didn't. Historically, it was a far better idea to keep rooms separated. Not only did that mean you could choose to only heat the rooms you were currently using, but it allowed for privacy between public and family spaces. The front parlor doesn't have to be large to meet with a couple of guests, but it should be clean and ready to go whenever someone drops by. Shove the functional spaces behind closable doors or in other areas of the house, some of which may have been sliding doors, so you can easily change that. Massive pocket doors that separate living spaces in half can be found in many older homes. Unfortunately, those stopped being a thing well before my house was even designed, let alone built. There is another reason, however, that is far more important: the kitchen, full of smells, heat, and fire. It was pretty common to set it up in a completely different building if you could. Basement kitchens were also a pretty popular option for that reason. When open fires, or even later ovens, had to be kept running most of the day, it was safer and cleaner to keep them away from the rest of the house. And having them in an area with lots of ventilating windows was often difficult to build into the house itself. So as ovens advanced and became more efficient, and kitchens in general became safer, it was still a priority to keep them sequestered, often in the back corner of a house, messy and smelly even with the newest technologies. Even as we made it into the 20th century, when the popularity for the small bungalow-style house takes hold, the kitchen is in its own space whenever possible. I love how this 1908 plan actually has a specific space for the icebox built in. In many versions, the kitchen is only accessible from the dining room through a pantry. It then has outside access, and sometimes the basement stairs are located in that area as well. My kitchen has an exterior door and basement stairs, and I can attest that it's a very useful layout. Obviously, this is before attached garages were at all common, let alone standard, and most of the ones I saw did not have a door to the house directly, which again makes sense in terms of odors, gases, and temperature. The rest of the living area tended to keep the separation between living and dining room. Other spaces, of course, added onto these in larger homes. Some open styles of walls were popular, the iconic pillar of the craftsman style, for example, but the distinct threshold was still present, a doorway rather than a lack of wall. In the 1920s, I came across a few floor plans that started to play with creating a larger entertainment style space. The dining room here is still visually separated with the fireplaces, but the living room wraps around into the additional music room. The casual eating space in the breakfast room and the kitchen are still fully behind walls and doors, however. Even with a wide range of layouts targeted at small or mid-sized homes appearing in countless catalogs during the 1920s, this clear breakdown of food versus living spaces sticks around. Some have the entry in the middle between them, others have a larger opening, but nearly always something. I recently came across some documentation that indicates my house design might actually have been from 1926, not the 1930s. And going through all of these floor plans really justifies that. Around the mid 1920s, there are so many examples of nearly the exact same layout: a separate entry off of one corner, living room to the side, and kitchen and dining room in the back half. I did notice that the kitchen is now accessible from a door in the entry as well. In my place, that door actually had a little seal around the edge to presumably help with the smell or draft. It was old and deteriorating, so it was removed. There's more of a focus on movement from one space to the next rather than building in privacy or multiple rooms off of one hall. Not that this is a universal goal. There's so many variations on a simple floor plan at this point. However, it's this experimentation with layout that points us towards the coming trend of combining the living and dining spaces. Around the late 1930s, examples of one open room with a corner or even small inset for a dining space started appearing regularly. This article from 1939 states that it's a great way to save space in smaller homes. There was a push after the economic fallout earlier in the decade to get as many Americans as possible into fully owned, not mortgaged, homes. As I've discussed in detail before, the previous system was volatile, and those with mortgages suffered greatly when the Depression hit. Part of the solution was making building houses more efficient and practical, thus cheaper. Small styles that would adapt to growing families down the road or simply adjust to the lifestyle they had were desperately needed. Entertainment in the home was far less formal than it had been in generations past, so a perfectly preserved parlor space was completely forgotten. A space for friends to come over to play cards, have a casual dinner together, or sit around the radio was much better suited to one larger room that would be rearranged as needed. This social life only grew after World War II, along with the number and size of houses. There was a massive family boom starting in the late 1940s, and more people than ever were looking for homes that could handle their expanding needs. The family dining combination is extremely common in the 1940s for this reason, even in more mid-size floor plans. The room itself has also grown large enough to allow for temporary or other non-solid walls in between. Sliding, folding, glass shelves, and other storage options set in between designated spaces without fully blocking the view. My grandparents built their little three-bedroom ranch home in 1950 and had a wall between the formal dining room and living room that was made up of a few cabinets below and shelves above. That's where my grandmother displayed all of her carnival glass and other collected pieces, as well as the candy dish all of the grandkids learned to steal from. Accordion-style walls or other disappearing styles were incredibly trendy, and it seems like new versions kept being invented. Separate the rooms in a moment to give privacy or keep a social event from being too busy in one space. Adjustability was a big goal. My silly little planter wall was yet another fad from this time. I found a few articles from the mid-1950s talking about the popularity of this very specific style or any interior planters. Though I do know strangely shaped half-height walls were a popular thing well through the 1970s, considering most of the other renovations to this house happened around the mid-1960s. Like the kitchen, there's a good chance that's when my wall was chopped. Open floor plan was even a term by the 1950s. An open floor plan and low ceilings, both hallmarks of new apartments and houses. This comment from a 1958 article wasn't an over-complimentary one. These floor plans still weren't quite the same as our modern version. In addition to continuing the combined dining and living room themes, the kitchen is just sometimes open to another room, partially. They relied on counter partitions or pass-throughs to make this work. A space where the family could have a quick meal at an open counter or where the kitchen table was visible from the workspace. This example from 1961 has the kitchen open to both the dining space and a laundry room. This is also the point where you'll start seeing a variety of new types of rooms. Recreation rooms, dens, or family rooms are all meant to describe slightly more private living space. Not so much intended for entertaining guests, but occasionally they are connected to those spaces. This example from 1959 suggests a folding wall to split the rooms when needed. Often the casual style of the living space was meant to hide less aesthetic things like the television or craft and work areas. Connecting the kitchen to these rooms or the casual spaces together constituted the open floor plan title. Not everyone liked this design, even in the 1950s. Designer T.H. Robsjohn Gibbings said the open floor plan, which forces you to sit in an emotional draft, was a terrible choice. Every sound carries through the space. He even called out the Eden kitchen counter, saying parents become soda jerkers when their children eat around counter space in the kitchen. Basically, they're stuck serving the kids instead of taking a break and eating. The big question, though, is why open became the next big thing in floor plans. New room types make sense as the house's families and social expectations grow larger, but why not separate them like before? More spaces for more people. The kitchen family room is growing in popularity, claims one article from 1963, but then it explains it. In these days, the servantless house is more the rule than the exception. Hence, the popularity of the kitchen family room combination, where the lady of the house can pursue her culinary chores in the company of her family. Without a live in maid, caring for the children and cooking were being left to one person. You can see examples of maids' rooms planned in even in some fairly tiny houses prior to the 1950s. For those that didn't have that space, it was still fairly common to have someone that worked there during the day. Of course, I'm talking mostly about the middle class who would have been the customers for these ideal home layouts. But there were two major things happening that meant having hired help was increasingly uncommon and undesirable. First, this being an affordable option for the standard middle class family relied on extremely cheap labor, and that was made possible by racism, Jim Crow laws, sexism, and so much more. Black women and immigrants took up these difficult jobs for little pay because there wasn't much else they'd be allowed to do. But that was really starting to change in the 1960s with the civil rights movement. Social shifts like this also fed into the second reason. Women were being encouraged to tackle the household on their own as a sort of social responsibility, made possible by replacing former human help with machinery. You can do it yourself with the help of this new oven, dishwasher, laundry machine, fridge, coffee maker, and more. Granted, the list of things that needed to be done alone at home was growing to match the saved time in many cases. I talked about this in the video about how much clothing people used to have, growing from washing mostly underwear to nearly all of our clothing. But even if there wasn't that much time saved, there was the social impact of the idea of it. These two things worked in tandem to create the system that meant the home needed a family space for functional reasons, ironically now considered a traditional setup, which is really only a little over 50 years old. This floor plan example from 1967 perfectly sums up how things were changing. A space meant for private family things, the kitchen, an eating nook, and family room all in one space, easily closed off from the formal entertaining space of the living and dining room. Interestingly enough, though, it hasn't been popular the entire time since then. While most 1950s and 1960s examples regularly have a space connected to the kitchen in addition to the living room, it wasn't nearly as universal in the 1970s examples. Yes, there still often is a single room extending off the kitchen. Sometimes it's open, sometimes there is a pass through, but plenty of times it's only open by way of an optional door. This space is not called a dining room solely, but it is often a recreational room, a combination space, or even an optional bedroom. Needing two living spaces was taking up excessive square footage. The baby boom meant that families, even in smaller homes, were expecting at least three bedrooms, if not four, and furniture had grown in size. I really need to do a whole section of research on bed sizes at some point. Bathrooms, too, were larger, and having one secluded to the main bedroom was showing up more. All that meant there was less square footage available for formal spaces that didn't really fit with the social changes of the time. Instead, flexible space to be whatever the family needed was the best option. A sliding wall or screen across the kitchen opening meant things could be changed back and forth for events, guests, or a growing family, all without women being marooned in the kitchen while her company or family enjoyed themselves elsewhere. An open floor plan wasn't really the standard concept of smaller and mid-size homes, so much as a single larger room meant that it could be whatever you needed it to be. That's why, in the late 1980s, open kitchens and open floor plans were being discussed as a more novel idea. While things hadn't been completely walled off like they had been earlier in the century, there was still a sense of partition. By the 1990s, those partitions were disappearing. The same social changes that had happened in the post war era were repeating. There's probably also some connection to how the economy flows back and forth over the decades, with new homes shrinking and growing to match. Is space a priority because of economic limitations, where it needs to adapt rather than expect to renovate or size up? Or is it that a separate and flexible space for numerous activities is preferred, where social expectations are high and the ability to have a clean and ready space for guests is a sign of success? My own childhood home, built in 1987, is a layout that I've seen variations on over and over, including one of my own houses later in life. The front of the house has a formal dining and living room off the entry, while the back has one long open space of kitchen, eating area, and family room. Doorways are often just gaps in the walls rather than framed in. There are no options for sliding something across to close and open a space as needed. The creative and useful partition options of the previous decades don't show up. It's a much easier and cheaper option to construct, I'm sure, but it does lose the earlier purpose and functionality of open concept in many ways. Not just the ability to not be sequestered in the kitchen, but to create a flexible living space that would adapt to a changing family and changing social expectations. Now we just have a fully visible mess from nearly every angle in the house. The kitchen smells, grease, and heat cover the entire level, and sounds echo throughout. There isn't a sense of creatively separated spaces for different activities like the 1950s, the TV in one space that won't interrupt the conversations happening in another, or the ability to pull a wall closed at the ring of a doorbell. Especially as I keep hearing, "Don't judge me for the mess. I'm sorry my house is such a mess," every time I go over to someone's home, as if we should be able to clean and tidy entire houses every day while working a full-time job or more. Just in case there's a visitor, open concept has become a burden as much as a relief. That's probably why there is an increase in people wanting the older style of closed off spaces. I personally don't need to see the kitchen from my sofa, nor does a planter wall sound more exciting than a curved doorway. I like a cozier feel. Not that the living room is tiny to begin with. I also don't have massively oversized furniture in there to challenge that, though. For now, I almost have my wall back. And regardless of how gorgeous the future plans for the kitchen are, it's nice to be able to shut the doors on it from time to time. I don't live a 1920s, 1950s, or even a 1990s lifestyle, but this version works for me. Though I do wish we had some of the old creative options in new homes. How about you?